It is Thursday, December 9th here at Draft Shark Studios in Rochester, New York. Welcome to the Week 14 Preview Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Schaaf. With me, as always, is Jared Smola. And Jared, this could be a tough week for fantasy points, judging by some of the numbers that we're looking at this week. I mean, we know it's Jonathan Taylor's bye, and that's going to be rough on anybody who has Jonathan Taylor on their teams, either in the playoffs or hoping to get into the fantasy playoffs. But it's otherwise not really a hugely impactful set of bye teams, it seems like to me.
Yeah, and there's some COVID questions, unfortunately, that we'll get to. But I think the biggest question of the week is probably in this Thursday night game with Dalvin Cook.
Yeah, and we'll get to that in a minute. But I mean, for the entire week, I was looking at the numbers this morning, and 9 of the 14 games carry over-unders of less than 44 points right now. So lots of games where we might not get a ton of fantasy points or real-life points scored. 7 teams carry implied projected point totals of less than 20. Another 3 are below 21. So, I mean, we're going to go through each of these games one at a time, but it'll be worth looking at these offenses to see who can really give us some upside this week.
Yeah, I guess the bar to start a player might be lower this week. There's some bad offenses in the NFL. We've known that all season. And I don't know if weather's impacting the over-unders yet either, but, we saw on Monday night, we're to the point of the season where weather is definitely worth checking on Sunday morning.
Yeah, what a trash game that ended up being just from, I don't know, a viewership standpoint. So we'll move on to the games now, though. We're going to start with that Thursday night contest. Pittsburgh at Minnesota. Vikings by 3 here. It's an over-under of 43.5. So starting off with one that's not projected for a whole lot of points. But the big news is that even though we thought Dalvin Cook was going to miss at least 2 games, it sure sounds like he's going to play in this game tonight against Pittsburgh. He's just 2 weeks removed, actually less than 2 weeks because it's a Thursday night, from dislocating his shoulder, tearing the labrum in there. Says that he's going to play in a shoulder harness. Tom Pelissero reporting that they are likely to play him, barring some kind of setback in the pregame warmup. So now we have to wonder what to do with the 2 Vikings running backs for this game.
Yeah, so we'll watch for pregame reports on the plan for Dalvin Cook, how he's looking in pregame warmups. Hopefully we learn more than we know right now. But like you said, though, 11 days removed from the shoulder injury. It sounds like what I've gathered from the Twitter doc so far. It sounds like, one hit to that shoulder could end his night. The other thing you mentioned, the harness, that's going to impact his pass catching ability. So, we added Cook to the rankings this morning. He wasn't even in there originally. His pass catching projection is definitely lower than it would be normally. His rushing projection is lower than it would be normally. I think there's a chance he's limited to begin with. There's a chance he's knocked out of this game early. So again, hopefully we learn more before kickoff tonight. But you can check the rankings now to kind of see the level at which we'd start Dalvin Cook.
Yeah, and the tough thing about that is we're all guessing. Even people who have medical degrees are guessing at just how Dalvin Cook's shoulder is going to feel. What kind of hits he might take. I mean, he might make it through the game fine. He might just land on it wrong one time in the first quarter and be done for the night. So we're guessing about him. We're guessing about Alexander Mattison. This is one to really track the reports right up until game time. And there's probably going to be reports on expected usage as much as we can get right up until game time. So it's one to for sure keep an eye on. Like Jared said, you can check the rankings to see where we have them. The guys around Dalvin Cook that you're going to have to decide between heading into the game, according to our rankings right now, Zeke Elliott, James Robinson, Devontae Freeman, Darrell Henderson. Jared, among those 4 guys, who do you think you would go ahead and start Dalvin Cook over, assuming that we get no big reports to the negative side on Cook before this game tonight?
Yeah, this is so tough too, right? With it being a Thursday game, because guys like Darrell Henderson, Zeke Elliott with the Tony Pollard situation, we don't even know what their projected roles are going to be in their games. So I might lean towards starting Cook over Darrell Henderson right now if you don't have Sony Michel. I'd probably start Cook over James Robinson too. Robinson beat up. We'll get into him, but he's been limited the past few weeks now. Was very limited in that last game. So I might start Cook over a couple guys that we have ahead of him in the projections right now.
I think I would start him over Darrell Henderson because I don't know what his practice participation is going to be yet. We're, recording this on midday Thursday. We don't even have the first practice report of the week from the Rams. So I like Cook. Like is a strong word. I would play Cook over Henderson tonight as of right now. I think I would lean James Robinson, though, because it seems like last week's thing was more to do with the fumble than the injury. And then, Zeke, we're kind of waiting to see what happens with the Cowboys. I guess I would wait and see what Tony Pollard sounds like coming out of Thursday's practice before making the Thursday night decision there.
Yeah, I mean, we'll at least get practice reports for these guys on Thursday, including the first report from the Rams, because Henderson does not play until Monday night. So we'll know more, before kickoff tonight. So keep tracking Shark Bites, and we'll keep the rankings updated.
And of course, so what about Alexander Mattison? I mean, assuming that we get Dalvin Cook in this game, assuming that we get no clear reports on how they're going to be used, how high are you starting Alexander Mattison?
He's 30th in our PPR rankings right now, so definitely higher than he would be if Cook was healthy. He was RB2, I believe, when we thought Cook was going to be out. That's kind of the level I think Mattison is an RB3. If you don't have, a solid second running back or a solid flex play, I think Madison's worth taking a risk on. I mean, again, there's a chance that he's game planned a bigger role to begin with, and there's a chance Cook leaves with injury, and then you get Mattison in a workhorse role for the rest of the game.
Yeah, I think you have to weigh Mattison as a ceiling play as opposed to just figuring out what he's going to get if Dalvin Cook is playing. So it really depends on specifically who you're comparing him with. I'm not sure that I would play Mattison over either of the Cardinals running backs for this week because it sounds like Chase Edmonds is going to play. But, I mean, I'm playing him over anybody from the Buffalo backfield, for example. It would be a difficult decision versus Henderson because we just don't know at this point. I think I would probably have to wait for Henderson if I've got Mattison, although, it kind of depends on what else you have available for insurance options there if you're making a decision like that. I think I'd play Freeman over Mattison, and we're talking well ahead of where they are in the rankings right now. But, beyond that, Alexander Mattison versus Jamal Williams, I think would be a difficult decision.
Yeah, Jamal Williams, Melvin Gordon, and Darrell Williams are the three guys right ahead of Mattison right now. Mattison clearly has the highest upside of that trio. But, if Cook manages to make it through the game healthy, I mean, there's a chance you only get 5 touches out of Mattison tonight. Yeah.
Tough spot. I don't envy anybody making the decision, but, check Shark Bites, check the rankings. Of course, it's not the only question for the Vikings offense tonight either. No Adam Thielen for this game. That's not a question. He's already ruled out, got a foot injury, left last week early. Kirk Cousins still wound up throwing 30 for 40 in that game, 340 yards, 2 touchdowns. It was the Lions, so, you always have to put an asterisk on those matchups. 14 targets for Justin Jefferson, 9 for Tyler Conklin, 7 for KJ Osborne. Those will be the primary receivers for Kirk Cousins again here. So the question, I think, is what do you do? How do you value Kirk Cousins for this game? And, specifically when you're weighing him versus potential decision players who are going to play later this week.
I mean, there's no doubt losing Adam Thielen hurts Kirk Cousins. I mean, Thielen has 40% of the Vikings receiving touchdowns. He has 31% of their targets inside the 10-yard line. He's Cousins' go-to guy near the end zone. And KJ Osborne's a nice player who's going to replace Thielen, but it's a definite downgrade. So it hurts. I think Cousins is 3 or 4 spots lower in our rankings than he would be if he had Adam Thielen. But the matchup's okay. We've talked about Pittsburgh's defense is not what it used to be. They're still without Joe Hayden tonight. Justin Jefferson could go for 180 yards by himself. So I think Cousins is still in play as a quarterback one, but again, he's definitely lower than he would be if he had his top 3 receivers healthy.
Yeah, I'm with knocking him a couple spots down. I do think that he's a little bit lower in our rankings than I would personally have him. I think the first decision that you face is you could have Justin Herbert and Kirk Cousins on the same roster. And in that case, I got to go ahead and play Kirk Cousins, not knowing, we'll get to the Chargers situation, but right now, not knowing about Justin Herbert's top 2 receivers, he's got a tougher matchup than Kirk Cousins does. And Cousins has been, he played well the last time that we saw him go without Adam Thielen for a stretch. That was back in 2019. So, things are a bit different at this point, but similarly, there is a very strong wide receiver 1 still in the lineup. There's still decent tight end. KJ Osborne looked fine this year, and Kirk Cousins has just been a solid player. So in 2019, we had Adam Thielen basically out from week 8 through week 15. And over that span, Kirk Cousins completed 71% of his passes, 7.9 yards per attempt, 5.4% touchdown rate, 108.3 passer rating. So, it certainly lowers the ceiling. There's a little bit more risk to him. But I like Kirk Cousins fine tonight against the Steelers defense that's ranked 25th in DVOA against the pass.
Yeah, 20th in adjusted points allowed to quarterbacks. Teams also lean pass against Pittsburgh. They're 8th in situation neutral pass rate against. And we know Minnesota tends to be a run leaning team, but maybe with the Dalvin Cook issue, they lean a bit more past, and the matchup will kind of dictate that too. So yeah, again, Cousins is definitely not a must bench guy just because he doesn't have Adam Thielen. I do think he's still in play tonight.
Mm-hmm. Steelers also without top corner Joe Hayden once again. He's basically been the only Pittsburgh corner that's played, and he played good at all this year. So a ding for that defense. On the Steelers side, Najee Harris, Deontay Johnson are obvious plays. Chase Claypool, I don't think quite reaches obvious. He did miss the first practice this week with the toe issue, but returned for full workouts the next 2 days. So it doesn't look like there's a real injury issue to consider here. He's in mid wide receiver 3 territory in our rankings.
I'm trying to figure out what's up with Claypool's toe because he did not play his usual snap rate last week. Just 63% of the snaps, 68% of the pass plays. Ray McLeod actually finished with a few more snaps and a few more pass routes than Chase Claypool. I'm assuming it was because of the toe. He was on the injury report last week, but not listed on the final. It was questionable or whatever. Same case this week. He's on there with the toe, but he's not listed as questionable. So that's kind of the risk with Claypool. But it's a pretty good matchup tonight. Very good matchup actually for the wide receivers. Minnesota's dead last in adjusted points allowed to wide receivers. I think Claypool is kind of a risk reward play. Ben Roethlisberger is coming off what was I think one of his better games of the season. He had his second highest PFF passing grade of the season. If you watch the game too, in the fourth quarter, they went with a lot of no huddle stuff, a lot of shotgun stuff. And that kind of sparked the passing game. So I'll be curious to see if they stick with that at all tonight.
I would not be at all surprised if this game goes well over the 43.5 points because both of these offenses are capable. Neither one's explosive, especially at Pittsburgh, but there's not a whole lot of pass rush on the Minnesota side to really challenge Ben Roethlisberger. He's been throwing quickly lately to try to help that pass protection. There's plenty of talent left, even with the injuries. So I wouldn't be surprised if we get more points than expected here.
Minnesota's D is healthier this week, though. They're getting Eric Kendricks and Anthony Barr back, and Patrick Peterson's off the COVID list. So it's not the injury-stricken defense that the Lions lit up last week. It's going to be better tonight.
That is true. Pat Freiermuth has a more negative matchup as a result with both Kendricks. With Kendricks back, with the secondary healthier, the Vikings have been a negative matchup for tight ends in coverage. Pat Freiermuth's just been a TD or bust type. 4 targets in each of the past 2 weeks, under 45 receiving yards in 6 straight games. So, he's an option, but not somebody that I'm getting excited about this week.
Yeah, he's in the low end tight end 1 area of our rankings. He's still 5th in expected fantasy points among tight ends over the past 5 weeks. And he's been good more often than not in games that Eric Ebron has missed. And Ebron, of course, out again tonight. So, the matchup's not good for Freiermuth, but I do think he's still a decent play.
Yeah, he's probably high in expected fantasy points because there are like 5 tight ends that we can count on getting targets week to week from.
Exactly.
I think I would play Tyler Conklin over Freiermuth here because I think the target ceiling is higher and there's a little bit better bet for yardage on those catches, but very similar, I think.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I do think Conklin's a slightly better bet for targets, and his matchup is a bit better too. Steelers kind of middle of the pack in tight end defense.
Anything else for that game?
Nope.
All right, let's get to Sunday now. And Baltimore at Cleveland is the first one up. It is Browns by 2.5. Over under is 42.5 for this one. So another one where we're not expecting a whole lot of points, and that's what we got in the first Cleveland-Baltimore matchup a couple weeks ago. This is tied for the 3rd lowest over-under of the week, just 1 point behind Seattle and Houston, though, half a point behind Detroit and Denver, so very close to the bottom there. Lamar Jackson's not playing well lately. He's still 6th among quarterbacks in fantasy points per game over the past 5 weeks, though.
Yeah, and he's finished as a top 12 quarterback in 3 of his last 4 games. Quarterback 1, quarterback 10, quarterback 11. The one game he didn't was against the Browns. He finished quarterback 19 that week. That was an ugly game 2 weeks ago. Not much offense on either side. I think Lamar had 4 interceptions in that game. He did finish quarterback 1 and quarterback 4 in the 2 meetings against Cleveland last year. And Cleveland's 21st in pass defense DVOA. They're 21st in adjusted points allowed to quarterback. So, Lamar definitely sits lower in our rankings than he usually would, if he was playing well. He is still inside our top 10, and he's, not a guy I'd be, looking to bench for someone off the waiver wire.
Yeah, it's frustrating, but yeah, I'm not going to reach for somebody who's freely available like Taylor Heineke to play over him. So it's bothersome, but not necessarily worrisome. Part of the reason he's still up there in fantasy points per game is because that stretch, that past 5 games, still includes the huge game against Minnesota, 3 touchdown passes, 120 yards rushing. And that's the kind of thing that he's capable of. So even though we're not getting close to that most weeks right now, that's the scary part of sitting Lamar Jackson is he runs for 120 yards and a touchdown in a game, and all of a sudden he's having a Taysom Hill type night.
He hasn't ran for a touchdown since like week 2 or 3. You know, he's definitely due for some positive rushing touchdown regression. I think he's gonna score a few times the rest of the way on the ground.
Yeah. So Lamar Jackson, Mark Andrews, Marquise Brown, all fairly obvious starts here. Rashad Bateman has gotten into obvious not start at this point. I know I dropped him for a backup kicker in the FFPC main event this past week just to get set for the championship round there. I think the other kind of decision guy among Ravens is Devontae Freeman, who is working off of 3 straight games now, 14 plus carries.
Yeah, I think Freeman, not a must start, but a pretty comfortable RB2 play. It 2 weeks ago, it looked like Latavius Murray was sort of turning it back into a 50-50 committee. But Freeman was well ahead of Murray in snaps and pass routes. He outcarried him 14-2 last week. Freeman had 8 targets last week. He's been a top 34 running back in 4 straight games now. That includes 2 top 10 finishes. He's 16th in expected fantasy points per game over the last 4. So he's getting RB2 level usage. Cleveland's run D is solid, but it's not one to run away from. So I do think Freeman's like a lower end RB2 this week.
Run away from. I got you. And I think it could help his target outlook this week that if you look back on that first meeting between Baltimore and Cleveland, there was a ton of pressure on Lamar Jackson, and he has been getting pressured quite a bit lately. So that can only help, I think, the target outlook, the chances of Devontae Freeman being a key receiving option in this game. And he has 5+ catches in 2 of the past 3 games. So yeah, Devontae Freeman, not somebody to get excited about, but a pretty solid low end RB2 and somebody I'd easily play ahead of like Jamal Williams this week.
Yeah, 19 targets for Freeman over the past 4 games. Kind of crazy because Baltimore doesn't usually target their backs like that.
Yeah, a bunch of them in that game where Tyler Huntley was in there for Lamar Jackson, but had 8 of them last week with Jackson around. So it's not just the Huntley thing. Elsewhere, there's nothing else that I like on that Ravens or offense worth talking about. What do you think?
No, you said it with Bateman. He was 4th among Ravens wide receivers in pass routes last week. Devin Duvernay and Sammy Watkins ran more pass routes. I'm not sure what's going on there. Like, I thought Bateman had been playing well, but his usage has been trending down for a couple weeks now. So he's not bankable in fantasy lineups right now.
Yeah, he'll still be interesting for next year and beyond, but I think he's not somebody that you need to hold for redraft currently. On the Browns side, Jarvis Landry did not practice Wednesday dealing with a knee issue. I think it's really more of a management thing, though. I doubt that he is shaky to play this week.
Yeah, he's been sitting out practices on Wednesday for a while now. Be nice to see him healthier coming off the bye week, but that's evidently not the case. This is a good spot for him, though. Baltimore, we talked about them. They're a pass funnel defense, much tougher against the run than the pass. They're without Marlon Humphrey now for the rest of the season, so the secondary is even weaker. And Jarvis Landry has done well against Baltimore. He had 6 catches for 111 yards in that game against them 2 weeks ago. He had 6 and 5 catches in their 2 meetings last year. So tough to get excited about the upside of anyone on this Browns passing game, but I do think Landry's a pretty safe wide receiver 3 option this week.
Yeah, mid wide receiver 3 territory. I think he's fine in there. Did have 3 straight games of 26 yards or less before that big game against the Ravens. So certainly far from a safe option. And I mean, the Browns said this week that they believe Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt are ready for more work. So they'll be keeping it on the ground as much as they can. But when they throw it, they're not going to look too many other directions away from Jarvis Landry. Maybe, though, we could get some more looks for Austin Hooper in this game. Just 3 targets, 0 catches in the first meeting with Baltimore. But this time, David Njoku's on the COVID list. I don't know if that keeps him from playing in this game or if he has a chance to return. He said he has no symptoms, so maybe there's a chance he gets back for the game. Harrison Bryant has an ankle injury, so it might just be Austin Hooper as the only tight end in this game.
Right, and tight ends have remained a big part of this Browns passing game. 29% of Browns targets have gone to tight ends. It's 8.8 targets per game. I don't think you project Hooper to soak up all of that. With the shape the wide receiver core is in right now, Hooper could definitely, be the number 2 option in this passing game. So I do think it, at least for this week, and the matchup's good too. Baltimore has been weak against tight ends all season. So I think Hooper's a, viable spot starter this week.
Yeah, I think you're looking in that tight end 1 to tight end 2 fringe. Austin Hooper versus guys like Pat Freiermuth, Cole Kmet. I would take a shot, I believe, on Austin Hooper over Cole Kmet, who I'm not even sure he knows where the end zone is. Hooper versus Freiermuth, I think, would be more of a coin flip, though.
Yeah, I'd play Hooper over Komet, but I would play both the tight ends in tonight's game over Austin Hooper.
Anything else from that game?
No. Kareem Hunt's off the injury report this week, so he was kind of limited in his first game back prior to the bye, but I think he's going to be back to his usual role. And that's a concern for Nick Chubb, especially in a game where the Browns could fall behind.
It is, but I don't know if these Ravens are capable of making the Browns fall behind. So I wouldn't personally worry about that too much as I'm setting my lineup and deciding on these running backs.
No, you're definitely starting Chubb in season long. It's more of a DFS thing.
Mm-hmm. Dallas at Washington, Cowboys by 4, over under 48. And on the Dallas side, he kind of alluded to it with the Alexander Mattison decision, but Tony Pollard, no practice Wednesday because of a foot injury. So we're kind of waiting to see what happens with him on Thursday and beyond. Of course, Zeke Elliott practiced in full because he's determined to show everybody that his knee is absolutely fine. He's like the knight in Monty Python, where you cut off one of his legs and he's still coming at you, and you cut off both his arms and he's headbutting you. But Zeke's going to play no matter how slow he does it.
Well, and Zeke did say on Wednesday, he said he expects his knee to be back to 100% in 3 to 4 weeks. So that's kind of like NFL playoff time. So it's not going to help fantasy owners. He's going to keep lumbering around out there. Tony Pollard, did not practice Wednesday with a foot strain. The foot strain happened on that long touchdown run against the Saints. Mike McCarthy said today, he said something, his quote was like, Pollard's rehab is intended to have him ready to play versus Washington on Sunday. So Dallas is hoping he's out there, but it's definitely not a lock. They signed Ito Smith to the practice squad on Tuesday or Wednesday. So I think there's, some concern Pollard's not going to be out there. I don't know if that means Zeke would be back in a full workload if there's no Pollard, or if they would mix in Ito Smith or Corey Clements on the roster too. So it's definitely a wait and see situation with this backfield.
Yeah, I guess I would probably have to go ahead and play Mattison over Tony Pollard if I'm deciding between those two guys. Because, even assuming that they're both active, we're talking about 2 number 2 running backs where we're totally guessing on what the workload's going to be.
Yeah, if those are only 2 options, I'd go ahead and play Mattison tonight. If you have a decent fallback option, if you don't play Mattison and Pollard sits out, then I might look that way. But it seems like there's a real chance that Pollard does not play on Sunday.
Mm-hmm. We could all use a bounce back game from Dak Prescott this week. And the Washington defense has played better than it did to begin the season, but still not tough in pass defense. Dak's got his wide receiver core, should be all the way back this week. It was, kind of last week, but Amari Cooper was just coming off of COVID symptoms to the point where we didn't even know if he was going to play. So I think they should be healthier this week. I would think that we should get some real upside in this game from the Dallas passing game.
Yeah, this is a really nice spot for Dak Prescott. He's someone I'm going to be considering in DFS. I think he's a pretty easy start in season long. I believe this is only the second game where we're going to have, all 3 of these wide receivers fully healthy throughout. And the other one I think was the Atlanta game where Dallas just blew them out and they didn't really do anything in the second half. So you have that going for Dak Prescott. You have this Washington defense. Yeah, they've been a bit better against the pass lately. They're still much better against the run than the pass, and teams are attacking them through the air. Washington is second in situation neutral pass rate against. So teams are going super pass heavy against Washington. We've seen Dallas be willing to go pass heavy in spots, run heavy in spots. So the matchup here would dictate a pass heavy game plan. So that's what I'm hoping. That's what I'm banking on with Dak Prescott. I think he's a top 5 quarterback play this week.
And you would think, since they've shown us that willingness, since they obviously believe in Dak Prescott and the wide receivers, and both of their running backs are hurt, you would think everything would point to them throwing the ball plenty in this game and trying to exploit that area. I hope so for my main event team, because I would like some big points from Dak.
Let's do it.
Of course, all the healthy wide receivers complicates the target outlook a bit for Dalton Schultz, but I still feel better betting on him over guys like Tyler Conklin, Pat Freiermuth, Cole Kmet, Austin Hooper, because of the strength of that offense that is second in scoring and first in total yards.
Yeah, me too. I would start Schultz over those types. Like you said, again, we haven't really seen this offense at full strength too much. I do think Schultz target share is going to take a hit. But again, if we get a pass heavy game plan for Dallas, there could be enough to go around for all these guys.
Yeah, I would also play Dalton Schultz over Kyle Pitts, and we'll kind of get to his game in a little bit. But the big knock on Kyle Pitts at this point, he's got 3 top 12 finishes all season.
He's been disappointing.
On the Washington side, Logan Thomas, no ACL tear, but he is out for the rest of the season. Ricky Seals-Jones was limited Wednesday, so might be ready to return from a hip injury that's cost him multiple games. And, we talked about it off air previously, but I feel like I thought Ricky Seals-Jones was doing better the last time that Logan Thomas was out than he really was. He had 4 full starts, averaged 6.5 targets, 4.3 catches, 40.5 yards. But I mean, now that I look at those numbers, tight end is just so rough that numbers like that look attractive as averages.
Yeah, low end, low upside, tight end 1, Ricky Seals-Jones. The issue this week, I mean, first we'll have to see if he's even going to play. And then we'll have to see if they want to keep John Bates involved. Not that he's been great, but he's a rookie they just drafted. Maybe they want to keep him involved. Now, every week so far this season, it's been one tight end as the guy, playing almost 100% of the snaps. But I guess I'm not even sure who that would be if Seals-Jones returns this week. So we definitely try to avoid these guys, and we can revisit it next week when we have a better idea of what the usage is going to be the rest of the season.
Yes, I agree with that. And I mean, Antonio Gibson, Terry McLaurin are the obvious guys on this offense. The one other that's maybe non-obvious but carries some upside is J.D. McKissic. The Cowboys, I mentioned, second in the league in scoring, first in yards, also second in situation-neutral play pace. So this is really a spot where you could see Dallas jumping out to a lead. And if that happens, I think the outlook gets better for McKissic. Even if it doesn't happen, though, he should be decently involved. The last time that we saw McKissic play, he had 5 catches, 7 carries, 2 touchdowns, one of those being a red zone run in that game against Seattle that Washington won.
Yeah, this game has shootout potential. Washington is a fast-paced offense as well. This is the fastest-paced game of the week in terms of situation-neutral pace for both teams. We'll have to see if McKissic gets cleared. He was limited in Wednesday's practice with the concussion. Antonio Gibson's role in the passing game has been increasing too. He had 7 targets in that game 2 weeks ago, even when McKissic scored twice. So McKissic maybe loses some targets to Gibson the rest of the way. So yeah, I think he's in play as a low end PPR option, but always tough for me to get excited about those type of guys where you just can't project a ton on the ground.
No, I mean, if you're getting excited about J.D. McKissic, then you're probably doing it wrong. But if you're like, I need a running back, and J.D. McKissic's down there, it's like, all right, I think maybe I'll be okay this week.
Yep.
Anything else from the Washington side?
No.
The Las Vegas Raiders at the Kansas City Chiefs. Chiefs by 8.5 in this game, over under 48. And Doug Farrar tweeted this yesterday, Jared. Chiefs ranked 27th in defensive DVOA through week 9. Since week 10, they rank second in the league in defensive DVOA behind only the Patriots. They are up from 27th to 5th against the pass. They are up from 30th to 7th against the run. And all that is including what Javonte Williams did to them on Sunday night. So this defense that started the season looking like one to target with whatever you had is suddenly one to try to avoid if you can, if you're making decisions.
I was just about to say, I don't know if I'd go as far to say is it's one to avoid. I think it's at least one not to attack. I don't know. The KC's last 5 games have come against Daniel Jones and the Giants, the Packers with Jordan Love, Derek Carr, who actually finished quarterback 8 against the Chiefs that week. Dak Prescott, who they did, they shut down the Cowboys offense, and then Teddy Bridgewater and the Broncos last week. So we'll see. I mean, again, Carr had a nice game against the Chiefs last time around from a box score perspective. I didn't think he played that well. He also had Darren Waller in that game, and Waller remained sidelined for Wednesday's practice. So at this point, I'm not expecting him to play on Sunday. And if that's the case, then I would not want to use Derek Carr as a quarterback 1.
Yeah, I agree with Derek Carr making it back to the QB1 fringe if Darren Waller's available. And, if he's like really available, not if he's like, well, it's game time, game day decision. We'll see how he is. So it's a spot. I agree. It's not somewhere where I'm going to be scared to play players who I would normally feel comfortable about. But if it's close, the Chiefs are not a matchup to target right now. Hunter Renfrow has become an obvious play. Hunter Renfrow right now is what Jarvis Landry used to be.
Yeah, did Jarvis Landry even ever have 2 straight 100-yard games? Because that's what Renfrow has done
I'm not sure.
the past 2 weeks now. Yeah, Renfrow's been a top 14 wide receiver in half PPR in 4 of his last 5 games now. He's been even better in PPR. That includes a wide receiver 10 finish against the Chiefs a few weeks ago. He had 7 catches for 46 yards and a score in that game. And again, that came alongside Darren Waller. And if Waller remains out, that should just mean more volume coming Renfrow's way.
And of course, we saw last week that just because Darren Waller is out does not mean that Foster Moreau is a lock as a starting tight end.
Yeah, that was disappointing. And it wasn't just, the fantasy production that was disappointing. The usage was disappointing as well. He had just 3 targets. Moreau did. It was an 8% target share. And he ran a pass route on just 64% of the pass plays. That's the bigger concern for me. So, Waller is outside our top 12 tight ends this week. The matchup is good against the Chiefs. They've remained pretty weak in tight end coverage. So DFS, I think Moreau is still an interesting guy, but I would try to look elsewhere for season long.
Yeah, and he's certainly still an upside guy if you were looking for players in the range of Cole Kmet and Austin Hooper, but
yes.
Not as exciting an option as he might have seemed this time last week. Josh Jacobs remains a solid option here. He put in a full practice Wednesday, which is notable because last week he had the ankle issue pop up during the week. He was questionable for the game, so it sounds like he's good to go. And Kenyon Drake's done for the year, so that can only help Josh Jacobs' usage, I would imagine.
Yeah, I think Jacobs is like a borderline RB1 at this point with the usage he's been getting, and especially with Kenny and Drake out now. Jacobs had already been seeing nice volume in the passing game. He's been getting the majority of the Raiders carries. We'll have to see if Jalen Richard makes it back this week from the COVID list. There's a chance that he steals some of the passing game work. But again, Jacobs has been getting it. We know he can do that. So I think just volume wise, he's a top 15 running back play this week.
Mm-hmm. Anything else from that game?
We didn't talk about the Chiefs, but I don't think there's not much to talk about, right? I mean, you're starting the usuals. This Raiders game was the one game in the last 6 or 7 weeks that the Chiefs offense has looked good. Mahomes had the 5 touchdowns. Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce both went off. In the backfield, Clyde Edwards-Helaire has returned for the past 2 games. He's still losing most of the passing down work to Darrell Williams, which hurts a bit. But CEH is 18th among running backs in expected fantasy points over the past 2 games. So, he's getting mid-range RB2 usage. I kind of think that's what we should consider him the rest of the way.
And it can only help that he's further removed from the injury now. And the Raiders, who are already soft on defense, their top 2 linebackers are dealing with injuries this week, both Denzel Perryman and Corey Littleton. So we'll watch and see if they're available. One of their backups is already done for the season, Nick Kwiatkowski. So a soft defense anyway already looks more favorable as a matchup for those running backs. So yeah, it's a good spot for both of them. And also in the secondary, Trayvon Mullen was designated to return from IR with their starting cornerback for the Raiders, but he's not joining the active roster this week. So not getting any reinforcements there. So it remains a positive matchup. I kind of don't want to talk about the Chiefs offense because it's it makes you sad to look at what Patrick Mahomes is doing right now. But, it's similar to Lamar Jackson where you're still going to go ahead and use him.
Yeah, and again, this is the matchup. I'm going to be all in on the Chiefs in DFS this week, kind of hoping people are off them because they've been just so disappointing. But the coverages the Raiders use, they don't use that cover 2 stuff that's been giving Mahomes trouble. And you think they'd be smart enough to switch to that for this matchup, but they did not in the first meeting, and we saw what Mahomes did.
Mm-hmm. Seattle at Houston, Seahawks by 7.5, over under 41.5. So get ready, folks. This is going to be a barn burner. It's the lowest over under of the week by a slim margin, but still the lowest. On the Seattle side, we got no practice for DK Metcalf on Wednesday with a foot injury. Last week, he went limited, full limited. Week 12, he went out full limited. Week 11, out full limited. So it's tough to know whether the foot is actually bothering him more or if it's just a management schedule for an injury that he's been playing through. Yeah. Maybe it depends on how hard a specific day of practice is going to be for the team. So I think at the least here, we know that DK Metcalf is managing a foot issue. And I guess we kind of have to factor that in for some downside risk.
Yeah. And, Metcalf, of course, has just been disappointing for a while now. And I got to think the foot has something to do with that. I think Russell Wilson struggles and the Seahawks offense just being crappy in general has something to do with it too. Metcalf he's 24th among receivers in expected fantasy points over the last 4 weeks. So he's not getting elite usage, but it's been fine. And man, this matchup against Houston should get the Seahawks offense going a bit. So, Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, I would, stick with them in fantasy lineups this week. I think Russell Wilson is kind of the fringy guy. He's been playing better lately. If you look at the PFF grades, he's 14th among quarterbacks in PFF passing grades over the last 3 weeks. That, first game back from injury was horrible, but he's been decent over the last 3. And plenty of touchdown potential for him, I think, in this matchup against Houston.
Houston matchup has actually been neutral for QB scoring on the year, though. So It's certainly not something that would make me downgrade Russell Wilson, but it definitely keeps me from getting excited about Russell Wilson with the way that they've been playing. I would pretty easily play Kirk Cousins tonight over Russell Wilson. I would probably play Joe Burrow over Russell Wilson this week too.
I'm playing Russ over those guys. A lot of the reason the Texans haven't given up a lot to quarterbacks is they're 28th in neutral pass rate against. Teams haven't been needing to throw on that much, and Seattle probably won't need to throw a lot here either. But Seattle is actually 11th in situation neutral pass rate over the last 11 weeks. We think about this team is a run heavy team, but I think their running game's just so bad they've kind of stopped trying to be a run heavy offense. So I think Wilson should get enough volume in this game to put up a pretty nice fantasy outing.
Travis Homer was the top scoring running back for the Seahawks last week because he took a fake punt 73 yards for a touchdown. We had 11 carries for Adrian Peterson. We had 10 carries for Rashad Penny. Alex Collins was inactive for that game with an abdominal injury, but this week he reportedly says he feels much better. I would certainly not play any of these running backs unless I absolutely had to use one of them.
Agreed. The matchup is good, but the running game has been horrible all season, no matter who's been in there. And I have no idea how carries are going to be distributed, especially if Collins ends up active.
Yeah, so we'll see how that goes, but probably poorly. Seahawks on defense are down safety Jamal Adams for the rest of the year with shoulder surgery. That might matter in this game if they were actually playing an NFL team.
Yeah, as usual, it's just Brandon Cooks on the Texan side. And Cooks has actually been a bit better this year with Davis Mills than Tyrod Taylor. Targets 7.3 per game with Taylor, 8.2 with Davis Mills, 4 catches per game with Tyrod Taylor, 6 catches per game with Davis Mills. So he's gotten crappy quarterback play all season, no matter who it's been from. But I still think he's a decent wide receiver 3 because he's going to dominate targets.
Yeah, I'm going to have to be weighing Brandon Cooks this week versus guys like Jamal Williams, maybe Zeke Elliott for a PPR flex spot. I'm not even sure which way I'm going to go there yet.
I'd rank him Zeke, Cooks, Williams.
Yeah, we'll see. That one I can at least agonize on a little bit longer this week and just sit back and enjoy Justin Jefferson tonight.
Nice.
Otherwise for Houston, we'll see. I mean, you talk about Davis Mills, but we don't even know for sure yet that he's going to be the quarterback here, right? Because Tyrod Taylor was practicing even with that wrist injury that may or may not include a torn ligament.
Yeah, the Texans haven't ruled him out for this game yet, but I don't know. We'll see. I think it would make sense for them to go back to Mills the rest of the way now.
Especially after the way Taylor played last week against the Colts.
Yes.
Nothing else from this game, right?
No.
Jacksonville at Tennessee. The Titans by 9. It's an over-under of 43.5. And we'll start on the Jaguars side where we talked about James Robinson a little bit before. He is still dealing with the heel injury, also listed with a knee issue. It doesn't seem like those were the things that limited his playing time last week, though, because he was in there late in a game where they got blown out. It seems as though the coaches were punishing him for a fumble, although I haven't seen them talking openly about it, so I don't know for sure if they've even admitted that. This week, we had Trevor Lawrence say that James Robinson needs to be on the field more. So if your star rookie quarterback with luxurious hair is speaking publicly about how much a running back needs to be on the field, you know that things are not going great for the coaching staff, and it might be a good idea to just kind of go with that. And, not only that, but put the guy on the field that is one of the best players that you have on offense.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the injuries and he's dealing with a heel and a knee issue. I'm not sure if that's why the snaps were down last week, but I think they're definitely impacting Robinson's volume and his play. The reports last Sunday morning were that, there was a chance he didn't play in that game. He was kind of a game time decision. And like you said, he remained limited in Wednesday's practice. So he's definitely not at 100%. That obviously hurts, especially when we're talking about a guy in a bad offense to begin with. So I don't know. Robinson's still around like running back 20 in our ranking. So he's not a must bench guy. He's definitely lower than he was. He was borderline RB1 before these injuries became an issue.
Yeah. I think a fully healthy James Robinson could be, among the top 12 this week, as it is more of a higher end, I would say RB2. We'll kind of see how the reports go on the health heading into Sunday. But I think it seems like it was more questionable coaching than physical stuff that limited him last week. Yeah, the Jaguars, by the way, lost that game by 30. and they still had nobody get more than 6 targets. They still ran it 25 times, even though James Robinson was on the sideline for a lot of it. Laviska Shenault had as many rushing attempts in that game as he had catches.
I mean, questionable coaching in Jacksonville is a continuing concern, until Urban Meyer gets out of there. It's an issue. Laquan Treadwell might honestly be the best bet among Jacksonville wide receivers now. He's finished wide receiver 38 and wide receiver 34 the last 2 weeks, and he leads Shenault and Marvin Jones in expected fantasy points over that span. Treadwell's actually 25th among receivers in expected fantasy points. So ideally, you just avoid all these wide receivers, but Treadwell has been an every down player for the past couple of weeks.
This is the Seattle backfield of wide receiver situations. Please don't play any of them if you can help it. When Laquan Treadwell is your bright spot, that's a clear sign that you're a fantasy situation to avoid.
It's bad.
James O'Shaughnessy, though, led that team last week with 6 targets in the first game without Dan Arnold. So some usage there. I don't know if it's enough to actually make him an attractive fantasy option.
I mean, he's not as good as Dan Arnold, and even the routes weren't as strong as Arnold was getting. 69% route rate for James O'Shaughnessy last week. You mentioned the 6 targets, 21% target share. If that continues, then he's an option. I'd have to be desperate to be using James O'Shaughnessy. I think pretty much every tight end we've mentioned so far, I would play over him.
Yes, I'm with that as well. On the Tennessee side, Julio Jones took part in practice Wednesday, which is weird. I'm not sure. I think the last time he practiced on the Wednesday was like 2006, but still needs to be activated from IR with that hamstring injury. Seems like he's trending in that direction. We'll have to watch him throughout the week, though, to make sure that actually happens.
Yeah, Julio has been out since week 9. So I don't know. Maybe he's gotten enough time off where that hamstring is finally not an issue. The matchup's good too. Jacksonville 28th in adjusted points allowed to wide receivers. I would still want to see Julio make it through a game healthy before using him in a fantasy lineup, especially at this time of the season.
I would like to as well, but if you're in a situation where you're talking about how much Laquan Treadwell has done the past 2 weeks, I think Julio Jones is worth considering at least.
Yeah, but I would do someone like KJ Osborne tonight over Julio this week.
Yes, I would do that as well. There's still some sorting to do now in the Tennessee backfield because Jeremy McNichols looks like he's ready to go after missing a couple of games with a concussion. But, we have to wait and see and wonder whether Dontrell Hilliard has passed him with his play over those past couple of games that McNichols missed.
Yeah, and maybe we'll get a report on that, or maybe one of those guys will be inactive on Sunday. I'm kind of betting against that. I think Foreman, McNichols, and Hilliard will all be active, and if that's the case, I mean, again, it's a matchup we want to attack. Jacksonville's a mediocre run D, but they give up a lot of fantasy points to running backs because they're always behind, and I do think Tennessee will be able to run it plenty in this game. I think Donta Foreman is safe as like the early down big back here, so I feel decent about him as like an RB3, maybe an RB2 even in non-PPR. I don't know how snaps and touches are going to be divvied between Hilliard and McNichols. So unless we get a report on it, I would try not to use those 2 guys.
Yeah, it's a shaky situation to jump into, and I agree with that. Donta Foreman is the double C thick running back in this committee. Otherwise, I don't know what to expect the team to do unless they say, because Jeremy McNichols was the clear lead guy in that smaller pass catching role earlier this season. But then, I mean, based on Dontrell Hilliard's production the past 2 games, clearly he's outproduced what the team thought he would do if they put him on the field. Otherwise, they would have gotten him on the field much earlier this season. So I think that has to factor in somehow. And it's not like McNichols was doing a lot. He was, involved as a receiver quite a bit when he needed to be. And they need that this week. So it's tough. I hope we get some indication. If I was a Titans coach, though, I wouldn't have any reason to tell you chuckleheads what I'm going to do with my backfield ahead of the game.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I will say Hilliard got 11 carries in that game against the Patriots. McNichols only had 4 and 7 in his 2 games without Derrick Henry. So, and I don't know, I guess it wasn't even game flow because Tennessee was playing behind New England. But I don't know. It seems like Tennessee already gave Hilliard more rushing work than they were willing to give McNichols before his concussion. So if I had a lean, it'd be to Hilliard. But again, there's just no way to know for sure.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. Maybe we'll hear something before Sunday, but we'll see. There's really nothing else of interest to me on the Tennessee side, and the Jaguars are basically been a neutral matchup for QB scoring, much like Houston, where it's not anything that you really like about the defense. It just hasn't been the pushover spot that you would think it is by how the team has played.
Yeah, these are two of my least favorite offenses in the league to discuss. So let's move on.
Nice. So let's get to the Saints and the Jets for some exciting offense. Saints by 5.5 in this game. It is an over-under of 43. Alvin Kamara looks like he's trending toward playing in this game, which is especially good news because Mark Ingram is on the COVID list.
Yeah, and he gets the Jets, who are dead last in adjusted points allowed to running backs. And Kamara put in a full practice on Wednesday, so if he goes full, I got to think he's ready for his usual workload. The Taysom Hill stuff is a slight concern. Hill's going to steal some rushing volume. Kamara's target share or target volume is probably going to be down. He averaged 4 targets per game in Taysom Hill's 4 starts last season. One of those was that funky game against the Broncos where Denver didn't have a quarterback and New Orleans didn't have to do much. So I don't know. I think you'll probably still get 4 to 6 targets from Kamara here. And again, he has big upside on the ground against this Jets defense. So Kamara to me is back to being at least a top 12 option. He's someone I'll be considering in DFS this week too.
Yeah, I mean, another key thing to remember is they had Michael Thomas at that time. Right now, They have nothing anywhere close to that. I think they had Emmanuel Sanders too, healthy at that point, right?
I think so.
I guess I don't know if he was active or inactive. He was at least on the team at that point. So they had a much better situation at wide receiver. I'm not going to downgrade Alvin Kamara's target expectation for Taysom Hill. It's certainly a concern. But Kamara's their number 1 receiver at this point. So I would definitely play Alvin Kamara. I think there's huge upside this week for him against the Jets. Taysom Hill is also, he carries plenty of upside into this one, regardless of how much he throws the ball. Because he reminded us last week with 100 rushing yards in that game. Even if you take out the Deontay Harris long catch and run touchdown, we still would have gotten a top 15 fantasy week from Taysom Hill there.
And like almost all that rushing production came in the second half. It was weird. Like the first half, the Saints were using Hill as like a drop back passer. Then the second half, they kind of remembered he could run. And all that running came after he hurt his finger. That's the risk with Hill here. I mean, his passing projection is kind of always shaky to begin with, although the matchup against the Jets obviously helps there. But he's going to be playing through a mallet finger, the same injury that Russell Wilson had. Hill's is obviously much less severe. He didn't even need surgery. He's going to play through it, but it adds some risk. But again, as long as he's running, to me he's a quarterback 1. Hill has finished as a top 11 fantasy quarterback in all 5 of his NFL starts now.
He's Jalen Hurts pretty much.
Maybe even better as a runner. Honestly, I think he's like closer to Cam Newton as a runner.
Mallet finger is definitely something I had never heard of before this year, but football teaches you things like compartment syndrome was the one from a couple of years ago. Mallet finger, by the way, is an injury where to the tip of your finger where it keeps you from being able to straighten it. That was what I found in looking up mallet finger. I don't really know beyond that, the technical aspects of it, but it sounds pretty important to a quarterback. Fortunately, Taysom Hill is not really a quarterback. As we said, there's not really anything going on a receiver here. I'm not chasing any Saints pass catcher in this game.
Me either. I think Tre'Quan Smith is still the best bet, and the matchup's good. But I don't expect a lot of passing from the Saints in general in this spot.
Like if you were choosing between Laquan Treadwell, Josh Reynolds, and Tre'Quan Smith, would you be a good play?
I don't know, honestly. I can't give you a good answer.
I'd be like, why am I still paying attention to fantasy this late in the season with these guys to choose from?
I'd probably go Tre'Quan, honestly, because I like Tre'Quan Smith. I think he's good, and the Jets are horrible.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can make an argument in any direction, and it's fine to go with Tre'Quan Smith there. We do have a wide receiver question over here involving a couple of those guys. Azhar Ahmed says Laquan Treadwell, Josh Reynolds, or Jalen Guyton in half PPR, Jared. We haven't gotten to Guyton yet, but who are you playing among those 3 wideouts in half PPR?
So it'd be Guyton unless Keenan Allen and Mike Williams are back. It might even be Guyton. Who are the other guys? Tre'Quan and...
Yeah, Laquan Treadwell, Josh Reynolds, and Jalen Guyton.
Oh, I'd probably go Treadwell if the Chargers get their top 2 receivers back. But I think Guyton would be in the mix even then.
I think Treadwell and Josh Reynolds are the same guy heading into this week. So, yeah, I would go for Guyton most likely, especially if either Keenan Allen or Mike Williams are out, and if both of them are out, of course. And I would still consider him even if both of those guys are back.
Yep, agreed.
All right. So on the Jets side of this one, we got some progress from Zach Wilson last week. And by that, I mean he wasn't awful in the first half of the game. It was actually pretty good, produced some touchdowns. And they said going into the game that they wanted to get him settled down earlier, playing better in the first half so that he didn't stink for a half, fall behind, and then play better in the second half. It worked. And then they stunk in the second half. So, I mean, maybe next year for Zach Wilson, nothing for this year for fantasy. So Jets wise, for me, it's Elijah Moore and it's nothing else.
Yeah, Wilson got his second highest PFF grade of the season last week. I did think it was one of his better games. You know, like you said, he's still not a fantasy option, but it obviously helps Elijah Moore if his quarterback can play a bit better. Elijah Moore did not practice on Wednesday with a quad injury. Robert Salah called him day-to-day, so not serious, but worth keeping an eye on for the rest of the week now. Elijah Moore is second among wide receivers in half PPR points over the past 5 weeks now. He's been awesome. Corey Davis done for the season now, so Elijah Moore should continue to dominate targets. And the Saints 30th in adjusted points allowed to wide receivers. I do think Moore is going to see quite a bit of Marshawn Lattimore in this game, so it's not a easy matchup for him. But the Saints have been giving up fantasy points to wide receivers.
Yeah, he's not a must play despite that production because the situation's so bad that he could easily see 10 targets and catch 2 of them in a given game, especially entering with an injury. But he's getting alpha wide receiver usage. It's not that he's producing fluky numbers on low usage. He's seeing like 30+% target share per game. And as you mentioned, Corey Davis is done for the year now. So no reason not to expect it to continue. One challenge this week is Keelan Cole is off the COVID list, and they have been playing him just as much as Elijah Moore, not targeting him as much, but Keelan Cole is on the field, for a starter's level reps and will be involved still. I don't think Keelan Cole is a big challenge to what Elijah Moore can do.
No, yeah, it'll be Moore and Cole on the outside and Jamison Crowder in the slot. Cole is less of a threat to Moore than Corey Davis would be.
Mm-hmm. Anything else from that game? Well, I mean, I guess we should mention the backfield. Tevin Coleman, the clear leader on the rushing side. Ty Johnson is the clear leader in playing time on the receiving side, but not the clear target leader.
Yeah, and Coleman's in concussion protocol, so he's iffy for this game. So you'd have, if he's out, you'd have Ty Johnson, Austin Walter, and then they still have LaMichael Pirine on the roster too, who's been a healthy scratch. But I would guess he'd be active if Coleman's out, and it'd still be a 3-man committee. Saints have been tough against the run all season, so avoid the Jets backfield.
Yes, absolutely. Now we'll move on to Atlanta at Carolina. The Panthers are 2.5-point favorites here, over under of 42.5. And on the Atlanta side, it's really just Cordero Patterson and Chill pretty much for me.
Russell Gage, no love for Russell Gage. I mean, we got it. We got his biggest game of the season last week. We highlighted him here last week in a good spot against the Bucs. Tougher spot here. Carolina 7th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. But I mean, Gage has been getting enough volume. He has 7+ targets in 4 of his last 5 games. He's 27th among receivers and expected fantasy points over the past 4 weeks. So he's getting wide receiver 3 level usage. I kind of think that's what he is. Don't expect another game like you got last week from him.
Yes, I think he's fine as a low-level wide receiver 3. He did get shut out the last time against Carolina. Didn't even get a target in that game. So it's a much tougher matchup for him this week. So he absolutely could give you 6 catches for 60 yards. He could give you Bubkus.
Yep.
And as we mentioned with Kyle Pitts earlier, we've gotten closer to Bubkus most times with him. He's tight end 10 back in week 2. He was tight end 3 in week 5. He was tight end 2 in week 7. No other top 12 finishes this year. He's had just 2 other finishes higher than 20th among fantasy tight ends. And the last time that he faced Carolina, he finished tight end 35, his season low. So I don't like Kyle Pitts this week.
Either do I, but as we've said, tight end so crappy that he's still a top 10 guy in our rankings, and I do think he's still a top 10-ish play. Pitts is 14th among tight ends in expected fantasy points over the past 4 weeks now. So he's not even getting top 12 level usage, and the efficiency has just really been bad without Calvin Ridley. That's been a problem. Pitts has been struggling as the focal point of opposing defenses, and Carolina's been tough against tight ends all season. Football Outsiders has them 4th in tight end coverage. They're 11th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to tight end. So I'm with you. I don't like Pitts. I guess I don't like him not as much as you don't like him. Just again, because tight end is so crappy. And Pitts, he's still an awesome talent. Like he can still, make one big play that kind of makes his fantasy day. He also hasn't scored now since, I don't know, way back when, which, that is bound to change, I think.
I would be taking a shot on the guys that we talked about at the bottom of tight end one territory over Kyle Pitts, because I think there's at least some upside to mine there. You mentioned all the matchup stuff, all the coverage stuff. Carolina was also running Stephon Gilmore against him in coverage when they met last time. So they treat him like a wide receiver. They're going to cover him like a receiver. And the Falcons don't have anything to challenge them to do otherwise. It's him and Patterson. And, if I'm taking one of those away, Kyle Pitts is the easier one to take away.
Yeah, Pitts is going to be such an interesting guy to kind of look at when the season's over. Like we always say that like tight ends that are used as wide receivers, that's a good thing. But like Pitts has struggled because they've been using him outside and he's been drawing like number one corners. Whereas if they used him at more traditional tight end spots, he'd be facing linebackers and safeties and he'd probably be faring a lot better. So I don't know. I do think hopefully Atlanta gets Calvin Ridley back next season. I think that'll help Kyle Pitts.
Mm-hmm. On the Carolina side of this one, Tampa Bay opened last week attacking the Falcons' pass defense. They had a 13-play scoring drive to open the game, and all 13 of those plays were passes. So it's clear that watching the Falcons, they were like, these guys stink against the pass. We're going to attack them there. Not sure Cam Newton is going to do the same thing this week, but the matchup certainly at least helps his upside.
I actually think Carolina's going to go run heavy in this game. They fired Joe Brady like as the games were kicking off on Sunday. Kind of good timing there. They promoted Jeff Nixon as their interim OC. He has a running backs coach background. He has a long history with Matt Rule. And it sounds like from reading, some of the Panthers beat writers that, the issue with Brady is he wasn't running it enough for Rule's liking. So I think you're going to see a run-heavy game plan here from Carolina. Atlanta's not much better against the run than the pass. Cam Newton can obviously be a big part of that running game. I like Newton to bounce back here. He had that total dud last time out against Miami. Miami's defense has been tough lately. They Lamar Jackson struggled against them. In Newton's other start this season, he finished quarterback 4 against Washington. 32nd in adjusted points allowed to quarterbacks. Atlanta's 31st in adjusted points allowed to quarterbacks. So it's another good matchup for Cam Newton. He's not the most comfortable play after what we saw last time out, but I wouldn't be surprised if he finishes as a top 12 quarterback this week.
Yeah, I mean, he's just never going to be comfy, but I like him this week as well. I think it's a great spot for him, and we should get plenty of rushing. I'm not interested in any Panthers pass catcher beyond DJ Moore. And I mean, even though we're expecting lots of rushing, it's tough to like this backfield because it looks like it's going to be Chuba Hubbard running and Amir Abdullah receiving.
Yeah, I think that's a concern for Chuba Hubbard going forward. I do think this spot sets up pretty good for him. The Panthers are home favorites, so game flow could work in his favor, should work in his favor if the Vegas line is right. And again, the matchup is good against Atlanta. They're 28th in adjusted points allowed to running back. So there's definitely some risk because I am with you. I think Abdullah is going to handle most of the pass catching work. He might even mix in on early downs more than, Chuba might give up more rushing work than he was when McCaffrey missed, the 5 weeks earlier this season. We'll see exactly what the backfield looks like. But I think the matchup is good enough that you can use Hubbard as like a borderline RB2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, it's worth noting that Amir Abdullah is a solid player. At some point he was, I believe, a 3rd round pick. He, was relegated to kick returner with his previous team, but he's on the talent front. He's at least similar to Chuba Hubbard. I
loved Amir Abdullah coming out. I still think he's good. I still think he might be better than Chuba Hubbard, but Carolina just drafted Hubbard. I think they probably want to see what they have in him the rest of the way. So I do expect him to be the lead ball carrier.
Yes, I expect Hubbard to get the ball more as well, but it's different from one of those situations where you're like, where did this other running back come from, and why is he stealing touches from the starter? This is somebody who's decent at football.
Yep.
Detroit at Denver, the Broncos by 10 points. It's an over-under of 42.5, just a half point behind Seattle, Houston for the lowest over-under of the week, and reasonably so. It's an unexciting game here. On the Detroit side, no practice for DeAndre Swift Wednesday. We're expecting him to miss at least another game with his shoulder injury, of course, missed last week. And in his absence, Jamal Williams suffered the Chuba Hubbard thing. He had plenty of rushing and lost receiving to Godwin Igwebuike.
Yeah, I couldn't believe that one. It's not like he's losing receiving to J.D. McKissick or Naheem Hines. It's Godwin Igwebuike. Just 20% of their outs for Jamal Williams only had 1 target. He got the 17 carries, but that was in a game where Detroit actually had positive game script against Minnesota, and that's not going to be the case most of the season. I don't know. So Williams is like a early down runner on a bad offense. It's not going to do much in the passing game. I think he's just an RB3.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. This is one spot, though, where I could see it swinging back toward Jamal Williams because this isn't Amir Abdullah as his backup. Godwin Igwebuike is 27 years old. He was an undrafted free agent back in 2018. He played safety in college. So maybe he's good at catching passes. I have no idea. He only got 2 targets last week, so it's not like they were targeting him a lot. This one was weird, and I wouldn't be surprised if it disappears this week and we get more targets for Jamal Williams. That said, we saw that usage last week. We can't pretend it didn't happen and just assume that the targets go to Williams. So I would use that if I'm weighing Williams versus somebody else close to him in the rankings, but I certainly wouldn't, swing his projection way back in the other direction.
Yeah, I mean, at least he's going to handle most of the rushing work. But at this point, I have to assume what we saw last week is going to be the usage. It's strange. Igwebuike's a freak athlete, though. If you look at his measurables, he's like a 99th percentile guy. I don't know. Detroit wants to see if he's part of their future, I guess.
Hey, if you go from being a college safety to an NFL running back, clearly you can do it athletically. So maybe he's showed them something on that front that we haven't seen on this side. Anyway. Over to the wide receivers, we talked about a little bit. Josh Reynolds, Amon-Ra, St. Brown, they're both in play if you're looking for a wide receiver 4 or 5. St. Brown's 12 targets last week, though, way out of line with the rest of his season so far.
Yes, the one note with Amon-Ra St. Brown is he's actually been playing more outside now. He's been playing in 2 wide receiver sets. Amon-Ra St. Brown has led the Lions in pass routes in 2 straight games now, whereas before he was, just playing in the slot. So St. Brown is the Lions guy I'd go with if I have to choose one of these guys. But, again, what we saw last week from this offense, you're not going to get it again, especially, in Denver, tough place to play against a pretty solid defense.
Yeah, so I would set expectations closer to 4 catches for him, some short yardage with that. I think Josh Reynolds is the higher ceiling guy just by virtue of having deeper targets.
Yeah, that's fair.
On the Denver side, it's really tough to like anything in the passing game because the Broncos are 10-point favorites and don't have a very good quarterback. It's easy to like Javonte Williams, though, after what happened last week, even though it looks like Melvin Gordon is trending toward returning for this game. Yeah,
and we'll see, what Williams' performance did to the backfield split here. Just knowing NFL coaches, and it's Vic Fangio, I wouldn't be surprised if it just goes back to being, a pure committee. But yeah, like you said, even in that case, if you give me 13 carries from Javonte Williams and a few targets against the Lions, I'm going to start him. He might just not be the top 10 guy that he was last week and that he would have been if Gordon remained out.
Yeah, certainly upside into that range, though, I think, even with Gordon back, because this is a game where they both could score. Jerry Jeudy, I think, is in play. I would play him over those Lions guys in a PPR lineup. I can't even say that Jerry Jeudy over Josh Reynolds is a strong feeling. It's the way I would go, but he's averaging just 55 receiving yards per game on the year. He does have 4+ catches in 5 of his 6 games this year.
I would play Jeudy over the Lions guys pretty easily. Judy's 37th among receivers in expected fantasy points over the past 4 games now. So, low end wide receiver 3 usage. The matchup's good here. I mean, the Lions are actually middling in adjusted points allowed to wide receivers. That's because they haven't faced a ton of pass attempts because teams are always leading against them. But I mean, it's a bad secondary. Jared Judy's going to be open. He just needs Teddy to get him the ball.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the problem. So we'll see how that goes. Anything else on that side? I mean, Noah Fant's still out there, but I feel like he's not even worth talking about at this point.
I mean, he's losing too much to Albert Okwuegbunam. It's like, 2 or 3 targets every game, but that kind of adds up at, especially at tight end. Fant's going from 7 targets to 4 or 5. That makes a big difference. The matchup's good here. I think he's decent. But Fant's outside our top 12 tight ends this week.
Yeah, and every time I see that, I want to like him more, and then I just don't because the situation doesn't call for it at this point because he's not getting the target volume that he seemed on the way to getting early this season for the reasons that you just said.
Yeah, this might be the saddest offense in the NFL because at least like Jacksonville, there's not much talent there. There's so much talent in Denver, and just none of them are doing anything.
Yes, it's annoying, and it's because they stink at picking out quarterbacks. And they could have Justin Fields right now, and we could all be celebrating.
Yeah.
Instead, we'll move on to the Giants at Chargers, which has a different issue that we already alluded to earlier. The Chargers are 10-point favorites here, over under 43.5. We'll have to watch that line to see if it changes at all, though, with the players who may or may not be playing. The big story, of course, on the Chargers side, Keenan Allen is COVID positive, Mike Williams, a close contact. So it sounds like they both still have a chance to play. I would have to think that Williams' chance is better as just a close contact. All he has to do is keep testing negative, and he'll be back for the game. Keenan Allen's going to need two negative tests 24 hours apart ahead of Sunday's game to be able to return.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I think Keenan Allen seems unlikely to play. There's not many guys I can think of this season that tested positive and then were cleared for the game that weekend. Mike Williams can be activated on Friday if he continues to test negative. So we should know his status by then. And if Keenan's out and Mike Williams is in, I think Mike Williams is, pretty easy top 20 wide receiver plays, it should be the clear top target getter on the team.
I think that TJ Watt tested positive and then returned within a week last week for the Steelers-Ravens game.
Okay, I thought it was the Monday night game that he returned for, but yeah. I mean, either way, it's definitely happened, but I think it's been pretty rare this season. So I would consider Keenan more likely to miss this game than not.
Yes, I would be planning right now as though I'm not going to have Keenan Allen available, and then if you have him, awesome. Yep. So what are the scenarios then? Let's assume, for the sake of this right now, that we do have Mike Williams and we don't have Keenan Allen. What else is going on in this wide receiver core?
Yeah, so I mean, it's Jalen Guyton and Josh Palmer as the next guys up. Palmer would get the bigger boost if Keenan Allen is out, because I mean, Jalen Guyton's already ran her out on 63% of the pass plays this season with Keenan and Mike Williams healthy. I probably still prefer Jalen Guyton if choosing between these two guys. But I do think Palmer's a guy that's going to do more of the Keenan Allen stuff. He's going to get more time in the slot. He's going to run some of the shorter range stuff, where I think Guyton would remain the big play guy. So I think they'd be close in value, but if I had to pick one, I would still go with Guyton.
Yeah, I think the thing between them is none of us knows at all how to project the targets for them. So without having a reason to say, Josh Palmer's going to get 8 targets and Jalen Guyton's going to get 4, you kind of have to go with the guy that has more of the big play flair to him, because it'll be easier for him to get to those numbers on fewer targets if neither one eats up a bunch of them.
Yep, agreed. I mean, I think Austin Eckler is going to pick up a bunch of extra targets. I think Jared Cook could as well. Cook's played 47% of his snaps in the slot this season. He's played another 18% out wide. So he's basically playing wide receiver for them. So Eckler and Cook could be as big beneficiaries as Guyton and Josh Palmer.
Yeah, I mean, everybody in that offense, you have to increase their target outlook for either of those wide receivers missing, especially Keenan Allen. And then if Mike Williams is also out for that game, then obviously that just extends the range of possible outcomes for all of the other guys that you're considering playing. And the fact that they have a good quarterback playing with them makes it easier to bet on the positive side than to worry about the negative side there.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, Justin Herbert would become a tough call too this week if he's missing both guys. If he gets Mike Williams back, I would stick with Herbert in most cases, unless you have like another top 10 option. But if both those guys are out, and the Giants pass D has been tough this season, they're top 10 in Football Outsiders pass D and adjusted points allowed to quarterbacks. So it'd be a tough spot if Herbert's without both his top 2 wideouts.
Yeah, that's why I would go ahead and play Kirk Cousins tonight, because I think he's a fairly high floor play, and there is the chance that we have neither of those wideouts available for Justin Herbert in a matchup that's not a gimme anyway. I mean, there's a chance that Justin Herbert could have a tough game there, even with both those wideouts. So unless I have Kirk Cousins, I agree with you. I would go ahead and probably roll with Justin Herbert. Fortunately, if you're not deciding between Herbert and Cousins specifically, then we'll have until Sunday to kind of see what the situation is better.
Yep.
On the Giants side, Daniel Jones keeps putting in limited practices with his neck issue, but it doesn't sound like they expect him to be cleared for action this week, right?
Right. He still needs medical clearance to take contact and play. And then Mike Glennon has a concussion, so he's iffy for this game. So it might be Jake Fromm, Georgia quarterback. He was like a good but not great college quarterback, 5th round pick of the Bills in 2020. And Fromm just signed with the Giants on November 30th. So like a week and a half ago. So he's not comfortable in this offense. It'd probably be a disaster if it's from.
Yeah, and we'll see. Mike Glennon might make it back from the concussion. I think no matter who it is, it's necessarily a downgrade for everybody else. We'll see about the receivers too. Sterling Shepard was a limited practice participant Wednesday. He's got the quad issue that he's trying to make it back from. Kenny Galladay, Kadarius Toney were not practicing at all. So, I mean, you can just go ahead and wipe them out of any fantasy plans. All of that should make it a decent spot for Evan Ingram versus other low-end tight ends. It just doesn't seem like the Giants care about what the spot looks like for Evan Ingram. It's not going to matter for his target count.
Yeah, we say that every week. I feel like this seems like it should be a decent spot for Evan Ingram. Then it really just doesn't end up mattering. Yeah, Kenny Galladay returned from that rib injury last week, so I kind of expect him to play. Kadarius Toney has a new injury, despite not even playing in the past month. He went from a quad injury, now it's an oblique injury. So I have no idea what's going on with him. Shepard would probably be a decent target bet if he ends up playing, but it's tough to like him with the quarterback situation.
Yeah. Definitely. It's also tough to like Saquon Barkley this week. He's back on the injury report with an ankle issue, limited Wednesday, so I doubt that his game status is in question. We'll watch that through the week, but he can't be close to 100% if he's showing up on the injury report again. And then the defense, the Chargers have been a matchup that we want to target for running backs all year, but it's not really nearly as bad a run defense as you would think. 15th in PPR points per game allowed to running backs over the past 5 weeks, the 8th fewest yards per rush allowed to running backs over that same span, and for the year, 7th in running back coverage DVOA.
Yeah, it seems like they've been better since the bye week. They did a good job against Joe Mixon last week. So yeah, I wouldn't say it's like a smash spot for Saquon. He's been getting enough volume, or he's been finishing as like a low end RB. His weekly finishes since coming back from the ankle: RB23, RB31, RB21. He's not the high ceiling guy you thought you were getting when you drafted him, but he's at least getting enough volume where he hasn't been killing you. And I would expect that to continue this week.
If we have a healthier seeming James Robinson by the weekend, I think I would play him over Saquon Barkley.
If he's like a full go in practice one of these next 2 days, yeah. But if not, I don't buy that he's healthy.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes closer to the weekend. Hope that you don't have to decide between those guys because neither is exciting at this point.
Yep.
Anything else from that game?
No.
Buffalo at Tampa Bay in what should be a much more exciting game. The Bucs by 3.5 in this one, over under of 53.5. Should be lots of passing volume on the Buffalo side. Far different from what we saw on Monday night.
Yeah, Buffalo first in situation neutral pass rate. The Bucs first in situation neutral pass rate against. I projected this game, and I think I gave the Bills running backs like 14 carries combined, and that might even be too high. I just think Allen's going to be throwing it all game. So that's obviously good news for all the pass catchers here. I think it puts Cole Beasley and Emmanuel Sanders and Dawson Knox in play, higher than they would be most weeks just because the pass volume is going to be elevated.
Yeah, I think Cole Beasley and Emmanuel Sanders would be like, I don't want to play those guys in another matchup with how things have gone for them lately. But because of this matchup, it's like, okay, we can consider using these guys. Cole Beasley versus Russell Gage, I think, would be close. That would be a coin flip kind of decision for me.
Yeah, I have a good note on Beasley from our buddy Dwayne McFarland at PFF. The Bucs are the 4th zone heaviest defense in the NFL. They play zone 75% of their snaps. Cole Beasley leads the Bills in targets per route run against zone coverage, 25%, even higher than Stephon Diggs. Cole Beasley is kind of Josh Allen's guy when he's facing zone. So I think it's a good spot for Cole Beasley. I'd lean towards him over Gage. Just I think Beasley has a higher ceiling in the offense and in this game environment.
I agree. Cole holding the zone, Beasley. I'm also loving Dawson Knox this week. I've been drafting him late in underdog battle royale drafts so far. The Bucs are 20th in tight end coverage DVOA. Dawson Knox has seen 19 targets over the past 3 games, including 6 in that Monday night game, which was a huge number for the amount of time that teams were passing in that game. 20.4% of Josh Allen's pass attempts over those past 3 games. And that 3 games, by the way, included a negative tight end matchup with the Saints on Thanksgiving night.
And Dawson Knox was freaking brutal in that Monday night game against New England, but he's such an inconsistent player. Like he's gonna come back from that. He's gonna have a 2 touchdown game in this one. I like him in this spot too.
Yeah. Anything else from the Buffalo side?
No, I totally avoid the backfield. We don't know how it works. It's going to be split. And again, I don't think the Bills are going to try to run too much.
Yes. Start Alexander Mattison tonight over any Bills running back.
Yes.
On the Bucs side, playing all the obvious guys, it is a tougher matchup for Rob Gronkowski. I just don't think it matters. And it's not like a brutally tough matchup because the Bills are 15th in tight end coverage DVOA.
It's a tougher matchup too for Chris Godwin in the slot. Teron Johnson, Bill's slot corner, has been good this season. I think this is going to be a massive Mike Evans game. The Bills lost Trey White 2 weeks ago, against the Saints. The Saints have nothing to test. Dane Jackson, who is Trey White's replacement. And then, on Monday night, the Patriots threw it 3 times. So, the Bills defense hasn't been tested yet without Trey White. Tom Brady, we know he's going to attack the weakness of the opposing defense. I think that, it's Dane Jackson right now. So I think it's an Evans blow-up game. Obviously more of a DFS note because you're starting all these guys in season long for sure.
What's been the slot share lately for Chris Godwin?
Yeah. So the other note here is Rashad Perriman took over as the Bucs number 3 receiver last week in place of Tyler Johnson. So Perriman played almost exclusively on the outside, and Godwin's slot rate actually been up last week because Tyler Johnson had been playing some in the slot. So it's been, I think Godwin was like up in the 80s, like 84% or something in the slot with Perriman on the outside.
Nice. Yeah, it's a good spot for all those guys. I don't think that the Bills are going to be able to limit whatever the Bucs want to do in this one. But it'll be curious to see if we get more Mike Evans targets, especially after a blow-up Chris Godwin game last week against Atlanta. Anything else from the Bucs side there?
No, Leonard Fournette's going to keep rolling.
Yeah, let's hope so. San Francisco at Cincinnati, 49ers by 1.5 points in this one. 48.5 is the over-under. And for the 49ers, Elijah Mitchell is in the concussion protocol. He's also had an MRI on a knee this week, which showed irritation, according to his coach.
Yeah, and Jeff Wilson is dealing with knee trouble too. Shanahan said his knee flared up was how he worded it during last Sunday's game. Wilson was limited in Wednesday's practice, so we'll see. It seems like Elijah Mitchell's unlikely to play. Wilson iffy with the knee thing, so JaMychal Hasty could kind of be the last man standing in this backfield. So Hasty should be owned in like every fantasy league right now because if he's the guy in San Francisco's backfield, I mean he's going to get heavy volume. And Wilson should probably be owned too because if his knee allows it, he'll probably be the lead back on Sunday.
Yeah, so we'll see where this goes. I would like to not use Jeff Wilson. I would like to not use JaMychal Hasty, but there will certainly be upside to him if he ends up being the starting running back here. Yep. Still no practice for Deebo Samuel on Wednesday, dealing with a groin injury, missed last week, so we're going to have to watch to see if he's able to play.
Yeah, the no practice on Wednesday would make me think he's not going to play in this one. I'd go back to Brandon Ayuk. I know he was semi-disappointing last week. It all went to George Kittle. That's going to happen some games. I think that'll swing back in Ayuk's favor. The Bengals could be without Chidobe Awuzie in this game too. He got hurt last week, so that would upgrade Ayuk's individual matchup. On
the Bengals side, no practice for Joe Burrow on Wednesday, listed with knee and finger issues. Doesn't seem like he's at risk to miss the game at all. He has said he's going to play through the finger injury, which is a pinky. So I guess if any of the fingers on that throwing hand are going to bother you, that's the one that you want to be bothering.
Yeah, that injury happened on the very first drive of last week's game. And, for a second there, it looked like he wasn't going to be able to return, but he ended up playing the rest of the game. Actually, he had like a average PFF grade for him this season. It wasn't noticeably hurt by the pinky issue. So we'll keep an eye on it. I think it adds some risk, but it seems like Burrow should be fine for this one. And his pass catcher should be fine. That one other injury note, T. Higgins did not practice on Wednesday with an ankle injury. He hurt that ankle near the end of that game last week. Was able to return, was noticeably hobbled. So we'll have to see what he does these next couple of days and see how he's listed on the final injury report.
Yeah, we'll have to be glad that it's no mallet finger for Joe Burrow here. Joe Mixon also missed practice Wednesday with an illness, not believed to be COVID-related, according to the team website. So it doesn't seem like that should be an option, but we'll watch and see. We have had illnesses be obstacles at some points this year, but we'll assume for now that we have Joe Mixon available and adjust if that changes. Anything else from that game?
Nope.
Sunday night, Chicago at Green Bay, Packers by 12, over under a 43.5. It's fallen 2 to 2.5 points from the open despite Justin Fields' return, and the Bears trail the Lions, Giants, and Texans for lowest implied total of the week. That's a combo, I think, of the Bears being bad on offense most of the time this year and the Packers being pretty good on defense. They're up to 12th in weighted DVOA overall on defense. They're 10th against the pass for the season.
Yeah, they've been good lately. The Bears offense has not been good, so don't go searching deep down the Bears depth chart for fantasy options. I think David Montgomery is a starter because of the volume he's been getting. He did miss practice on Wednesday. I think that's a load management thing because he had the 29 touches last week. But he's 12th in expected fantasy points over the past 4 weeks since coming back from his original injury. So Montgomery's in there. And I think Darnell Mooney and Cole Kmet are both lower end starting options for this Bears team.
Shoulder, groin, and glute issues for Montgomery. So things to watch for. Allen Robinson put in a limited practice. That's the first time he's practiced since before the week 10 bye. Can't play him at this point, but we'll see where this goes.
No, yeah, I mean, I think it adds some downside to Mooney and Kmet. Maybe Allen Robinson steals a few extra targets, but yeah, you're definitely not playing A-Rob this week.
Cole Kmet, 4 catches for 49 yards in the first meeting with the Packers. So there's not much upside to him. He hasn't scored a touchdown through 13 games, but he's kind of a floor. He's Ricky Seals-Jones.
Yeah, in his last 4 full games with Justin Fields, he averaged 6.3 targets, 4.5 catches, and 51 yards per game. And all that came with Allen Robinson. So again, I think, like you said, Kmet not exciting, but I do think he's, a pretty decent target bet.
On the Packers side, Green Bay carries the highest implied total for the week of any teams. Devontae Adams was limited Wednesday with a hamstring issue. Expect that he'll be fine. There was no Aaron Rodgers, of course, coming out of the bye, but he's playing through that broken toe, so we expect him to get back on the field. No practice for Randall Cobb, who suffered a groin injury in the last game before their Week 13 bye.
Yeah, Matt LaFleur said right before we started this pod that Cobb's going to be out a while with that injury, so he's definitely not going to play in this one. So it's going to be Devontae Adams, Marcus Valdes-Scantling, and Allen Lazard as Green Bay's pretty clear top 3 wide receivers. MVS has 10 and 9 targets in his last 2 games now. He's 18th in expected fantasy points among wide receivers over that span. And Chicago dead last defending deep balls, according to Football Outsider. So, maybe this is one of those big Marquez Valdes-Scantling games. My best ball teams would be happy.
Give me MVS over any of those fringe wide receivers we've been talking about, because even though I know there's a chance he gets 5 targets and catches none of them this week, there's also the chance that he gets the targets that you just said, 8 or 9, catches 6 and has an enormous game. So I'm more than willing to chase that ceiling in here and take a risk of getting, nothing. Yeah,
like I'm starting MVS over the Lions receivers over the Jags receivers. Someone asked me on Twitter this morning, would I start MVS or KJ Osborne? I think that one's close. I do think Osborne's a bit safer, but MVS definitely wins on upside.
Yeah, I think I would have to chase MVS over KJ Osborne as well. That one I agree is close. It's a coin flip. Mm-hmm. You can go with your favorite, but one's playing with Aaron Rodgers, one's not playing with Aaron Rodgers. We've got the downfield stuff clearly for MVS. So the ceiling is there and it's been displayed.
Yep.
The Packers also might be getting left tackle David Bakhtiari back from IR. He's at least coming back soon. Not sure yet if it's going to be this week, but could be as soon as this week.
And I'm really interested to see what the backfield looks like here. I got to assume Aaron Jones was limited in his first game off the knee injury last time out before the bye. The snaps were basically split right down the middle between him and AJ Dillon. Dillon had the 20 carries for just 10 to Aaron Jones. I don't know. I'm curious to see what it looks like. I do think Dillon's going to be a bigger part of the backfield than he was early on this season. He played well in Aaron Jones's absence. But I also think Jones will be the lead guy. If I'm picking between them for fantasy, I would go with Aaron Jones. But I think AJ Dillon's in play too as like an RB3.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I agree with that. All of that. And we'll move on now to the Monday night game where I think we have a similar backfield situation to what you just talked about with Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon. Rams at Arizona, Cardinals by 2 in this one, over under of 51.5 points. Of course, as we're speaking, we've got no practice reports yet from this Rams-Arizona game because the first one comes out Thursday for the Monday night game. So we're waiting to see on Darrell Henderson's participation. Last week, he missed the first 2 days, put in a limited Friday, then was ghost active against Jacksonville. He was active for the game, didn't play at all. It was an emergency thing. We had a big game for Sony Michel. And then afterward on Monday, Sean McVay said, quote, "I think it's really good to get Sony going. I think he's a rhythm runner, but I think we definitely would want to find ways to still have Darrell as a big part of it." Now, we will see exactly what that means. You can never just take what a coach says and literally translate it to expectations. So we'll see, but I think that at least leaves open the possibility of a healthy Darrell Henderson splitting with Sony Michel, possibly even to the point of not getting as many carries as Michel gets.
Yeah, I read that quote like 8 times trying to decipher what it meant, and I still don't really know like who he should be leaning towards. Again, we're going to see the practice reports. If Henderson's like still limited all week, and even if he ends up playing after that, at that point, I'd lean towards Michelle as the better fantasy bet this week. But we'll just have to see. It is a good spot. Arizona's 21st in adjusted points allowed to running backs, and Arizona is actually first in situation neutral run rate against. Teams are running at a higher percent of their plays against Arizona than anyone else, even the Chargers at this point. So you could see more running from the Rams in this game than usual.
Yeah, and I would take that quote to at least mean that if there's any limitation to Darrell Henderson, that Sean McVay would be just fine with running Sony Michel as the lead running back again.
Yeah, Michel's PFF rushing grade last week was higher than Henderson has posted in all but one of his 10 games this season. So, Michel produced in fantasy. He also just played well too. So he might have earned a bigger role going forward.
Michel's another guy that I'm going to have to be considering for that spot where I mentioned Brandon Cooks and Zeke Elliott earlier. So lots to look at going through the rest of the week. We mentioned it before. I would start Dalvin Cook over Darrell Henderson tonight if I'm making that decision. I don't think that I would start Alexander Mattison over Darrell Henderson, but that would kind of depend on what my other options are beyond that.
Yes, I would use Cook over Henderson. I would not use Mattison over Henderson. Assuming Cook is active, obviously.
Anything sneaky among the Rams pass catchers at this point, or is it pretty much what we've been seeing?
Yeah, I mean, Odell was limited, it seemed like, by the hip last week. He was on the injury report with that hip pointer. He only played 53% of the Rams' offensive snaps. So we'll keep an eye on his practice participation. Beckham still scored, came in with a decent fantasy game, but I prefer Van Jefferson at this point, with Beckham banged up.
Mm-hmm. On the Cardinals side, we got Kyler Murray back last week. We got DeAndre Hopkins back last week. I would have to think that they throw the ball more this time, in what should be a more challenging game situation than it was against Chicago last week, especially on a wet day. DeAndre Hopkins, I would assume that he would play more this week in a more challenging game, in a less wet game. So I think we'll get more from Kyler Murray and DeAndre Hopkins on that side. It's also worth remembering, though, that before the injury, Kyler Murray was running less than he was last season. So we should probably expect less rushing production than we got last week when he scored twice.
That was my, I don't think we can take much away from that game because, like you said, it was crappy weather. Arizona only threw it 15 times, but Murray set season highs with 10 carries, season high with 59 rushing yards, season high 2 rushing touchdowns. So at the least, the ankle is not a concern going forward. And, maybe they're ready to use him more as a rusher as we, get down the stretch here and move closer to the playoffs. We'll see. I mean, I think either way, Murray's back to being a top 5 quarterback.
Yeah, the only takeaway we really need to have with him is that he's good to go. If they're running him 10 times, the ankle's not a concern. The Cardinals also on Thursday designated Chase Edmonds to return from IR. We'll watch to make sure that he's added to the active roster because that's not the same thing. Designating him to return opens the 3-week window for practicing, and then they have to decide at some point in there whether to activate him. So he still has to be put onto the active roster, but Cliff Kingsbury said last week that he expected to be able to do that this week.
The deadline for a Sunday game is Saturday at 4 p.m. Is the deadline for the Cardinals Sunday at 4 p.m. because of the Monday night game?
Probably.
Yeah, so, I mean, we might not know for sure that Edmonds is going to play, when their Sunday games kick off. I mean, we also don't know how big a role he's going to play in his first game coming off an ankle sprain. He was basically splitting carries with James Conner before the ankle injury and, seeing most of the passing game work. I don't know. Conner played well in Chase Edmonds' absence. So I would not be surprised if, at least for this week, Edmonds is kind of eased in. So I guess I would try not to use Edmonds, especially, with the fact that we might not even know he's playing until Sunday. And I do think Conner is still like an RB2, even if Edmonds comes back this week. And, he's an RB1 if Edmonds remains out.
Yeah, I might just, if I have James Conner and I'm deciding between him and the Vikings tonight, I think I would hold off and wait and play Conner because at worst he's splitting the backfield with Chase Edmonds in his first game back. And there's the chance that Edmonds is not ready to play and we're still getting workhorse James Conner.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely have Conner in over Alex Mattison. Conner versus Cook would be a tough call with just, so many moving parts on both sides.
Yeah. Anything else from that Cardinal side?
Nope.
That's going to do it for this Week 14 preview edition of the podcast. Head over to DraftSharks.com now. You can see our full Week 14 rankings to help finalize your lineup decisions. Make sure to check all the tabs, tools, intel, teams, and boards. Lots of tools on the website to help you set your lineups. If you still have any burning questions for us, you can also find us in the free DraftSharks Discord. You can find the link to join us there in the description for this podcast. For Jared Smola and the rest of the DraftSharks crew, I'm Matt Schauf saying thanks so much for swimming with us.